And 5, 6, 7, 8. We're back, people.
We're
We're
back.
back. You may have noticed that there was not a post that went live last week.
We've just missed 1 week. I feel like that's okay. I feel like that's, that's life. I think we've done well so far to actually only miss 1 week, personally.
I actually completely agree. Also, very valid reasons. We've both been traveling for work. We both have had to move around interviews that we had scheduled that we then had to move around again. So, it's just life and we're doing our
Life.
best here. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
thanks for sticking by us.
You may have noticed Boyson slip in something there that we've both been traveling for work.
Yes. Tell the world. Is it time?
Yeah.
Do you get to talk
I
about this
feel
now?
like it's time. I feel like it's live on LinkedIn. So I feel like if it's on LinkedIn, then the pod people should know. So exciting news in my life is that I am no longer gainfully unemployed. I have got a new job, which is very
Yay.
exciting. So it is working in defense technology with a company called Andrel, which I'm super excited about. But yeah, it's very, very new. So I'm literally coming off the back of 2 weeks in the US doing onboarding and meeting the team. And then I had my first week this week in the Sydney office. So just figuring out the new norm with the pod, with working again, with sorting out who drops the kids,
I
how
was
we
going to
do,
ask you
how we
about
do life. Yeah. So, obviously we've been living a great life recently where I just have had a lot of flexibility. So, it's been a little bit of an adjustment for the fam. And obviously I was away from the kids, which was a big, I haven't been away from them for that long since the girls were born at least. So that
good
was a
trip.
big,
It felt like it was a long trip.
it was kind of, yeah, it's because we lose the day going back. Like
Yeah.
technically it was like 10 days away flying home, like leaving on a Sunday, flying home the following Wednesday. But then like you don't get home till Friday. So like, I don't know, it felt like 2 weeks to me. And I think for my husband, it felt like 3 years. So, but shout out to him. He did an awesome job with the kids and held the home front so that I could do that. And I think, we'll probably get into this because I think a lot of today is going to be like, what do you do when you start a new job? How do you kind of embed yourself? But
Yeah.
one of the things I think is super valuable, and we talked about this a little bit in the international episode, but like actually having FaceTime with your team when you can. And I'm very fortunate that part of onboarding was coming to the US, and my boss is based in California. And then I got to go to DC, which is where a large part of the rest of the comms team is. And so just like having face to name so that now when I'm back here, on my own, I know who I'm pinging. They know me. We went out to dinner. Like you just get a chance to have a little bit more of that bonding, I guess, so that then
Yeah.
you can kind of go away and do what you need to do. So yeah, that's my big news.
Congratulations. We're all happy for you.
Thanks.
I'm excited
Thanks,
for you. It
love.
sounds like you're loving it. So that's all
Yeah,
you can really ask for.
it's fun. It's all new, new industry. So there's crossover with tech, but there's a whole other world that I need to learn. So lots of learning. But yeah, it's exciting, and I'm excited to be back in a role and doing my thing.
And it's so interesting because I feel like when you're talking about your learning, sorry, I'm like jumbling over my words because my question is going in 6 different ways in my brain. Like you're talking about going and learning all of these new acronyms and learning a new language and learning a new kind of like industry. I just feel like we've talked about this so much, but it's such a good proof point of like PR is interchangeable across industry. Like you don't have to stay in tech if you've always been in tech. Like there's so much opportunity to, if you're a storyteller for a business, to be able to kind of branch out. And so I love that you're doing that. And it's such a good example of no matter where you are in your career, you don't have to be young and like pivot. You can
Yeah.
still
Well, I
like,
hope so. I mean, that's time will tell. But yeah, I think so. And that was part of the interview process was I was quite upfront about like, where the gaps were, but what I actually think I do bring. And there's lots of other things I think companies are looking for. So I agree. The storytelling skill set, the like comms skill set is quite adaptable. And then you've got to take it on yourself to, if it's a new industry, it's on me to go and try and learn that and ask the right questions. But the other thing that, you shouldn't underestimate, which I probably hadn't thought about as much, is like how much experience I had working in a growth company, working in a multinational company, working where you've got kind of a local subsidiary, but then you have a global team, and just all of those skill sets are something that was also super valuable beyond just the comms skill set, but that navigation of that world was actually a really valuable thing to this company. And so I think remembering those other business things that you've gained, depending on where you've worked and what you've done. And I probably hadn't thought about that as much in terms of what that brings from a value set perspective, especially if you're going to be, in my case, a single hire in a market. That ability to navigate worlds, HQ and local. But look, time will tell on the old industry. But I do think PR people can jump around. I think we're good at it, actually.
I was really scared about that with consulting as well, because I was like, oh, I can only take tech clients because that's the whole world that I know. And now that I've kind of realized that and understood what it takes and able to ramp in a new industry, or the right questions that you need to ask in order to get under the hood of a business outside of just like, what's the technology or what is the priorities from an industry standpoint. Like you really can. Like I have clients that are in the energy space, the cannabis space, and then mostly tech outside of that. But when I started particularly with my energy client, I was like, am I going to be able to do this? Like writing for a CEO and thought leadership, and I have to learn this industry. But like there's so many good ways to, one, learn about the business first and understand what their priorities are, and then taking that information and then learning about the news around it. And then kind of starting to frame here's our opportunity for gaps in storytelling in the market and those kind of areas. And once I got the hang of that, going into pitching like companies that were outside of the tech industry became completely like not a thing for me. I was not scared.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I also think sometimes having an outside perspective is not a bad thing. Like, when you're super in the bubble, sometimes the language you use, you're just so used to it that, you don't understand when it's not translating to your customer or to the end user. And so, and I think particularly with the company that I've joined, they're trying to be somewhat of a disruptor of the defense industry, doing things differently. And so having that sort of fast-paced tech growth experience is not necessarily a bad thing. We'll see, but I'm excited.
What's some of the advice that you would offer to people when they're kind of ramping into a new job, and some of the kind of first steps you take, given that you haven't done this in a long time? Like this is the first time that you've been new at a company in like a decade.
Well, that was super daunting, right? Because I haven't been new for a very long time. And even just like, this sounds really lame, but like, like making friends at work and things like that.
That does not sound lame. That's my priority.
Like I texted one of my old friends from Salesforce and I was like, I've got to make new friends. Like I haven't had to make new work friends for a long time. Like I've been, there's some relationships that have lasted that whole time at my old job. So I think that was kind of, as someone who has somewhat social anxiety, that's been a big thing. But no, from a overall perspective, I did a lot of pre-reading myself because I think having the vulnerability to recognize where your gap is, and so trying to fill that gap as much as I can myself. So in terms of not just pre-reading around like the coverage that the company has got before, but just the industry itself. I reached out to my network, who I know there's a few people, so I've got a friend who works in PR for another defense tech company. So reached out to her, and particularly in the interview process, I did that too, to try and kind of understand a little bit more. I've got another friend who's was in the military, and so just chatting to him kind of to understand the landscape of the ADF a little bit here, the Australian Defence Force. So a lot of that. And then once I landed, trying to keep a really open mind, and I called it my listening tour, and I'm still on it, but like just really, really trying to listen and learn and meet as many people as possible. So saying yes to like any offer of someone being like, hey, if you want to sit down and have a chat, I've been like, yes, please. And kind of regardless of where they sit in the business. I've been very lucky that my new boss set me up with a bunch of meetings as part of my sort of separate to the formal onboarding, a bunch of meetings with the different business lines to really get my head into what they do. But I guess having the vulnerability as well to tell all those people that I'm meeting, like, hey, this isn't my space. So, I may ask you what that acronym means, and I may say, I don't understand what that is. And there's definitely been times where like it has sounded like a different language to me, like someone is not speaking English, and I'm like, oh my Lord. So having the vulnerability to be like, hey, I don't know what that is. Can someone just give me the quick context? And like knowing that you might feel stupid because half the people in the room do know what it is, or more than half. And then I guess like, creative Googling is always a good thing. So like I wrote down all sorts of stuff that I heard. And if I didn't feel comfortable in the moment to ask, I just wrote it down and then was like, okay, tonight when I go back to my hotel, I'm going to Google all these things and try and figure out what it all is. So yeah, I think just like that kind of stuff. And then, just meeting as much people as possible and giving myself some grace. I think not trying to be like, super impressive and like, trying to tell everybody what you're really good at, like just being really like giving yourself some grace. It's brand new. It will take some time. I'm going to take that time because I think I'll be better at it in the long run if I do that. But yeah, they're probably the big things for right now.
It's harder when you go into a company that's already moving, and has the wheels turning. So everyone's kind of moving at a certain pace and you're just trying to digest and, ask smart questions. And I feel like you mentioned, one of the biggest things is don't talk just to talk. I think that's one piece of feedback when I first started working in the Sydney office in Salesforce. I think that's something that you told me to do that has always stuck with me. You're like, you don't have to say anything. But I feel like that quiet comes with a sense of power as well. And it makes your words more valuable when you're kind of holding on and you're in that learning phase. So that when you do ask a question,
just sit, listen, ask questions, be really humble, all of those things. I think that the flip of that is recognizing where you've come from, and it's different for everyone, right? But I guess the flip that I'm making is going from a very large listed company to a much smaller, unlisted private company who are in massive growth. And so, I think just some of the things that come with time with a big company process and things like that, it's like, don't be afraid to like, if you see something that you think, oh, I actually know how we could maybe do that differently. I think speaking up, but doing it in a way that's really humble and just saying like, hey, have we thought of this, or does this exist? Versus, like telling people how it should be done. But I think that is, don't, underestimate the value you might bring from having a different experience. So although I don't have defense, I have all this other stuff that I've done in this bigger, large company that may or may not be of value. We'll see. But,
I have these two kind of phrases that I always use. One, when I'm kind of trying to explore if something already exists or if they've thought of something before I make a recommendation. And I always say, can I ask you a question for context? And then I dig into like the whys so that I can then decipher myself, oh, they thought of this, or I can make this recommendation without looking like I'm telling them how to suck eggs. And then the other thing is, like, particularly with my solar client, when I was getting ramped with them, because the CEO was like an MIT scientist, like he's very smart and he speaks at this very high level or very top scientific kind of academic level. And every now and then I'd be like, can you just explain to me like I'm 5? Like, how would you tell your grandma about this? Or, I'm always like, tell me like I'm 5. And so now that's just become a part of our routine when I feel like something is like not humanized in our language and we need to actually explain it to somebody.
Yeah, I love those. They're both great. Yeah, I'll be using those in the coming weeks. Yeah. So yeah, those are my top tips. I'll let you know how they go. But yeah, so far so good. Enjoying it a lot.
And you've been traveling. So you traveled, like you mentioned, you went to DC?
So first to California to Costa Mesa. in Orange
Costa
County.
Mesa.
I was saying it like a very Australian person when I was there. I was like, so yeah, Costa Mesa. And they were like, yeah, no, Costa Mesa. I was like, okay, cool.
Wait, they call it Costa Mesa?
Well, yeah, a lot of people did. What do you
I,
call it? I don't know.
I mean, I grew up in California and I was calling it Costa Mesa.
Okay, well, maybe it is Costa Mesa. I don't know.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, like, I'm embarrassed for
I'm
myself.
definitely not saying I'm right either.
I'm just going to make this about me.
I just stopped saying it because I wasn't sure what it was. Anyway, please write in.
I'm going there.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I was that's where our HQ is. So I was there in California and then to DC, which I'd never been to DC. So that was really exciting because I was.
And you were in DC for the election, weren't you?
Just after.
Mm-hmm.
Just after. I think the election was whatever, the Thursday, and I flew the Saturday, something
Tuesday.
like that.
Yeah.
Oh, and I squeezed in a little jaunt to New York on the weekend to see one of my really, really good friends who we went to high school together, and she's just had a baby and she lives in New York. So there really wasn't going to be another time that I was going to be able to see the baby. So yeah. Shout out to Tash. She also works in PR. It's part of Xeno Group.
We love her. She's lovely. Yeah, I was in Boston. I did a little bit of work travel. I was in Boston for the election, which was interesting. I was there with one of my clients. They had their kind of like annual event there, which was amazing to go and just, like you said, be around people and make connections face to face and just be able to spitball and kind of brainstorm stuff on the ground. I've just forgotten how much I've missed that, especially as a consultant where I'm just doing everything kind of either over Zoom or by myself, like going on lots of walks and mulling things over, having networking calls where I can ask people questions and be a bit vulnerable or ask for advice. But it just makes such a big difference. And I really, really miss it. I feel like every time I go away for a work trip, I come home to Scott and I'm like, we need to move to a city.
But then you go snowboarding in the afternoon.
I know.
And you live where you live.
It's true. We nip out for an hour and have the best day.
Exactly. Okay, so what are your travel hacks? Let's do some work travel hacks.
I would say so work travel hacks, particularly for long haul flights, is have a routine of when everything happens on the plane. So like before dinner, you change into your pajamas. Like if I'm traveling for work, I will not drink on my flight.
Yeah.
It just messes me up too much. And like, I feel like my hangover has started before I've even landed.
Yeah.
Like I don't drink alcohol. I always buy like a 2-liter bottle of water and just have that and drink the whole thing by the end of the flight. Wash your face at a certain time. Like that's the long haul, like travel tips that I have.
Do you change your time when you get on to the time you're going to? Or do you just like roll with whatever is?
My phone does it. So like, I don't think about it.
No, but do you do like, so say you get on here in Sydney and it's like, I don't know, let's say your flight was 6 p.m. And so you have your dinner and then you're going to go to sleep in like 2 hours because you're tired because it's Sydney time. But actually LA time, it's daytime. So do you try and stay on the LA time? Or do you just go with what your body is like telling you to do?
I typically think about if it's the night flight. So if it's overnight flight from LA to Sydney, is this interesting for anyone?
I don't know. I feel like we've descended into like flight times.
I think we need to stop.
Listen, if our audience is like me, I enjoy flight chat, but not everyone will.
I'll try to speed it up. So I feel like, hey, you guys, we'll give you some skips for this episode and we can go from there. How about that? So if I'm flying from LA to Sydney, I know that we're going to land at 6 a.m. in Sydney. Yes. And so I will allow myself to sleep. Okay. Like I'll just be like, just sleep. It's overnight flight. Sydney is hard because when you leave, it's like 10 in the morning and then you land at 6 a.m. on the same day that you left. So you actually land before you left. Yes. And you have to do the whole day over. And that means that you need to sleep in that time because you've got to do the whole day over. But I find that if I can stay up as much as possible for that one and then at least go to bed when I land at like
Ooh, do you?
7 or 8 o'clock, if I can just push through, I will sleep all the way through the night and then I will not have jet lag.
Yeah. So my thing is for that flight, I get on like let's call it 11 a.m. and I try and stay awake for like at least 7 or 8 hours of that flight.
Mm-hmm.
Then I take a melatonin and then I try and sleep to get, you know, the last remaining probably, you know, 5 or 6 hours of that flight as sleep, so that when you land at 6 a.m. in LA, you feel like you've just slept. And then I push through to the evening. And like my hot tip for that for work is like absolutely go out and walk if you can in the sunshine. Like do a big walk, get vitamin D, and that should be able to push you through. Do not lie on a bed.
No, go to the gym in the hotel.
Yeah, do something like move and go see something or just keep yourself busy, because I think the minute you lie down, you will fall asleep. And then that, I feel, if you do that, ruins the rest of the work trip and I just can't function. So that's like my hot tip. Anyway, I feel like we can move on from the flight stuff, but
my hot tip is exercise every single morning at the gym. Like that's for some reason it just helps me with my jet lag.
I think that like dopamine, the endorphins, I think that for jet lag in particular is really helpful. I think the other one for me is like, don't be afraid. This may sound silly, but like, don't be afraid to like dine alone. Like find a nice restaurant and go like explore wherever you are. Like enjoy it. Like I don't think there's many
times
in your life.
Hotel.
Yeah,
don't
like
do it. Get out.
Don't just sit in your room and like, you know, that's fine for one of the nights when you're tired. But like other than that, go and have dinner by yourself. You do you. Like I just think it's a really nice thing to do when you're work traveling. Like order a glass of wine, have a nice dinner on your own. You know, Google good restaurants in the area. Like I just think that's a really like nice.
I love a solo dinner.
Yeah, me too. But I think people are sometimes like, especially in Australia, we don't have really like a dining alone culture, I would say. Whereas I feel like in America, there's so many restaurants where you can sit at the bar and like chat to the bartender, and like there'll be sports on the TV if you go somewhere like, you know, casual. Yeah. Or just in general, I find that like a lot of the restaurants have a bar you can sit at, which I love. Like that's cool.
When I first moved to Australia, I didn't have any friends, as you know. And so like when I first moved, I used to live in San Francisco and I dined alone all the time. Huge dine alone culture in San Francisco because you can just chat to anyone. Like no one's from San Francisco, so everyone's trying to meet people. Yeah. And so when I moved to Sydney, I was like, piece of piss. I'll be able to get friends and like meet people easy. And I would go sit at the bar and I would kind of go like, I'd be eating by myself and I would go to chat to someone and they would look at me like, don't talk to me. Like this is not a we conversation.
Yeah, I really think we've gotten better, but it is really not a dine alone culture or to your point, like a chat across the bar culture.
Yes.
Like, yeah. It's really interesting.
I failed miserably at that many times.
It's not you, it's us. Okay, any other hacks?
No. I think really just like don't bring as many. You're not going to wear as many clothes as you think you're going to need.
Definitely not. In fact, I really try and do carry on for most trips.
Save room in your luggage because you're going to want to shop if you have downtime. If you're in another country or another city that maybe has stores that you don't have. Duffy and I used to always, you know, when we'd fly back to San Francisco for work, we'd go to Sephora. We'd go to like Nordstrom Rack, like. So I would just literally pack half the clothes.
I literally Googled Nordstrom Rack goes to Misa and found one. So you could not be more right in terms of where I spent one of my evenings was.
I know who you are.
Nordstrom Rack. Yeah. Okay. The last thing we wanted to talk about, I think, well, we were going to cover the new president, but maybe we'll just leave that for another time because I feel like that's a whole can of worms. Unless you want to be as the resident American about the state of your country.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting the media cycle that's happening around it right now. Like what I will say that I'm enjoying watching and enjoying in the sense of like I'm watching a TV show is it's entertainment is like it's so interesting to see what it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the rise of these tech billionaires being put into power within our government.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see the congratulations of like the AI company CEOs now to Trump who were really silent during the election and things like that are, people are starting to pander a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially, with DJ Tanner, who I always want to say now since that first episode, JD Vance, being in the VP spot, because that's the
Yeah.
whole VC role opened up. Did you like that?
I'm just laughing because also Andrew, my husband, keeps calling him JD Sports, which is like a sport in here. So I feel like there's many names for the man.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's just going to be really, really interesting. I honestly, like, it's so easy to let everything take over your brain and stay
Yeah.
up worrying at night. So what I'm trying to do is just come at everything with like a non-biased, like, how do I interpret this?
Yeah.
What does this mean for me and my family? Like, what does
Yeah.
this mean, like, for the people that I care about in the world around me? And trying to just like look at it almost like a math problem. Like, I'm really just trying to be sensible about everything.
Yeah.
Because the news cycle is so heavy right now, and so polarizing that
Yeah, and
it's
still
just
very
feels
speculative. Like no
emotional.
one really knows, right? Like there's still time will tell. We're in the transition. There's roles being thrown about. It feels very. One day you read something, it just feels like it's a bit of a wave, and there's kind of been this like negative wave, a positive wave, and then very speculative, and we don't actually know yet how it's all going to play out. So I think it feels like a sensible approach to it. But
I
the
know.
media has been very interesting, I have to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that I will say, to be fair, is that I lived in Australia during Trump's first term. So I was very removed from what it actually felt like being here. And so for people that have lived here now who are going to live through both terms in the States, who knows what it was like during Trump and the pandemic and all of that, maybe I got off easy only having to do one term here. So it's just something that I think about. I'm like, maybe people are already exhausted trying to anticipate how they felt last time. So I'm just trying to stay optimistic and bipartisan.
I love it. That's the way to be, I'd say. So the last thing we were going to talk about, because I think we both have been talking about this a little bit, is just this like the power of community and building some of these PR communities. And I think there's probably two big things that spurred us on for that. You went to an awesome event, which I'd love you to tell us about.
Yep.
And then we got an email, which we'll touch on as well, from one of our community members. So maybe do you want to start with where you went with your exciting event?
Yeah, so in late October, was it September or October?
I feel like it was October.
It was October. late October. I went with Mixing Board to their annual event in Austin, Texas. And Mixing Board, for you, those that you don't know, is a PR communications kind of marketing senior leadership community. It's some of the smartest, like best comms people I've ever met from all walks of life. Like, it's not just technology. It's people that worked in the White House. It's people that work in technology at very senior roles. It's people that work at agencies and consultant agencies or individual consultants like myself, who just work with some of the best minds in the world. And they come together once a year, and we have dinner, and we have networking sessions, and we have planning and workshop sessions, and we have speakers. And Sean Garrett and the team at Mixing Board, who put this all together, do an incredible job, and it's just such highly relevant content. And that was one of the big things with event, where I was like, God, I miss community. I miss talking with other PR people. And I think that's the reason you and I started this podcast, for the most part, was because we wanted to be able to talk about comms things, and we knew that we were not alone in feeling like, especially working from home, this is it's so hard to ping ideas off of people and to like
Yeah.
kind of share where we're at. And so it was just such a really great reminder. And I would encourage anyone who's interested to apply to the mixing board community. It's not expensive, but the value comes back, in tenfold. It's just such a great place to be a part of.
Yeah, it made me kind of jealous because I feel like there's kind of little bits and pieces here, but there isn't that equivalent. And I know mixing board is global, but still kind of quite heavily US based. But it's interesting because we got an email from one of our listeners who is super keen to kind of build on the community that we're building as part of this pod and do some in-person stuff and kind of get a group together. And this listener is based here in Australia, and so it would be, an Australian meetup if we were to do it. And so we are excited. We would love to do something. We just need to figure out what is the right model and what makes sense. And obviously, one half of this dynamic duo is not in Australia; she's in Bend. And I would love to do it like with Boyson as well. So we need to figure that out. But if not, we will certainly look at, how we can build some community and start to do some things here locally. It's definitely on my mind as something I would love to do. But, amongst everything else going on right now, as well as finding the time to figure that out. But yeah, please let us know if that would be of interest. If you're in Australia and want to do it, or if you're in America and want to do one with Boyson. Shout out to the Bend, Oregon folks who might want to catch up. But yeah, if you're in Sydney or want to travel to Sydney and want to do a meetup, let us know because we are thinking about it and trying to figure out what would make sense. But we just, I think, both realize like the power of building a community, but also physically getting together with that community and chatting and talking. So it's an idea. It's bring away welcome feedback.
Yeah, let us know. You can email us at hello@smartandpublicpod.com, as well as if, have any other thoughts or feedback. Like this idea kind of stemmed from us already talking about community, and then we got that email in and we were like, we need to be doing something. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love to hear where you are, like where ideas and locations could be as well. And we promise we'll get back to you.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. And then just a shout out to the next couple of episodes. We have some exciting guests coming up. So I'm just like clickbaiting everybody to say we have been lining up guests in the background and just figuring out schedules. But we've got some really cool people coming on. And so, yeah, we will be getting those booked in and recorded and out to you all very soon. But for now, you'll just have to put up with us musing on flight times and how to travel.
Yeah, look, I liked this episode because it was a little bit of a tour around how a normal conversation with us normally would have gone anyway.
Yes.
So it was like we just had a phone call and hit record. I promise that in the future we'll have a little bit more theme, but we thought it would just be good to kind of bring you guys up to speed on what's been going on with us and kind of why we missed last week, talk about some top of minds and what's going on there, and then kind of line up what we've got coming up in the future because the guests are stellar and we're so excited.
Do you have a dumb in private this week?
I mean, other than what's happening to my face right now,
Well,
I
didn't want to say it myself because it wouldn't be my place to call out what's going on with your face right now. But if people watch the video, they'll be able to see. So maybe you should share. It's not
I know.
in private though, but it's sort of funny.
It is dumb. I mean, listen. So, listen to me. If for all of you that can't see us right now, I'll put this video on here. But essentially, I went and got that RF fractional micro needling and a laser on top of it this morning. I know that for some of you that have previously listened to episodes where I've talked about doing this to myself with the mini needles, I got enough feedback and horror email about like not doing that yourself. So I went and got it done professionally, and it's definitely ouchier than
It's looking raw. Let's just call it that.
It feels like, well, here's the thing. The needles were enough, and she numbed my face, so it was fine. But like the needle felt like not only a needle going in, but someone punching you at the same time because it's like the pressure. You just flinched. You just flinched.
Yeah.
And so then after I thought we were done, and it was about an hour, and I was like, oh, thank God we're fucking done. And she goes, okay, now for the laser. And I was like, no. So here I am. I'm red. I'm
yes.
red.
So
Just
yeah, we have to put it up on the Instagram. Although I feel like it's gotten better throughout, or maybe I'm just used to it. I don't know.
no, I feel like it is getting better. Like
Yeah.
I got it done at 8:30 this morning. It's now almost like 2 o'clock Pacific
I
time.
feel like you're going down. I feel like you're
Yeah,
you're
it's
mellowing.
happening. It's
Yeah.
perfect because I have like client meetings
I was
right
gonna
after
ask
this
if you had
back to
client
back.
stuff today.
Well, it's with Matt from Scheduler, who I feel like will
Oh,
give me a bit of grace.
yes.
But
And you could probably just tell him. Like you could be like, I understand
just,
my face is raw. This is what I did. Yeah.
do you
love
have
it.
it done private?
I don't know. I feel like my dumb in private is just like I am just socially like quite an awkward person. And so like this whole last 2 weeks of like meeting people and trying to do small talk is just not my strength. And I swear I've been going over things I've said like stressing about them.
Oh my God, it's like the scaries after you got too drunk at a work event or something.
Like
I know you
that,
were
except
drinking,
I
but
was just
yeah,
normal and talking. But
sure.
it's exactly like that. Like that same feeling of like, oh God, did I really say that? Like, am I that lame? Like, and the answer is yes, I am. And I don't think they'll remember at all. But here I am, like days later, replaying conversations in my head. And I guess like segue to this is like just to give an example of the types of things I do when I'm under pressure socially.
Mhm.
When I met my husband, the first time I met my husband, we were at a work thing. And I was so nervous to like talk that I started talking to him about the sandstone on the building. Like the rock that the building was made of. I was like, this is some nice sandstone. And then afterwards, I was like, I went home to my housemates at the time and was like, well, that's done because I spoke about sandstone. So just imagine that, but like in a work context. And basically, that's me in a social scenario trying to come up with something interesting to say. And so
This is why,
once I warm up, I'm fine, as you know. But it's like
yeah,
those initial meetings, I'm pretty awkward. So yeah, that's
this
my
is
job in
why,
private.
this is why we need Seamus with us at all times because
That's a
I feel like
buffer.
Seamus is good at the icebreaker,
Yeah, yeah. I would
and
also maybe
then you
send
can
Seamus
join
in
in.
instead of me. Like, you got this. You're the networker. I'll just be right here, and then I'll swoop in when needed. But yeah. So and also like I'm really proud of us that we've mentioned Seamus in this episode because we did have a goal to mention Seamus every single episode
We
until we have
do,
him on.
yeah.
So yeah,
Mhm.
we're working on that in the background, but I'm glad he got a mention in this one.
Hopefully, you guys feel like you know Seamus as well as we do now.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well
Okay.
that's it from me.
Oh, well, thanks everyone for listening. It was a great little hodgepodge episode, but we'll get back into the swing of it more regularly now that we've got our feet wet again. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us at hello@smartandpublicpod.com. We're on Instagram and TikTok at smartandpublicpod. And please listen, review, rate, and subscribe. Okay, we'll see you next time. Okay, bye.
Bye.